The SEAL commander looked at her through his binoculars and scoffed. One woman sniper against a dozen armed militants. She'd be dead in minutes. 5 minutes later, 12 enemy bodies lay silent in the forest, and he was staring at her in disbelief. Meet Staff Sergeant Luna Phantom Cross, 28 years old, dark brown hair usually braided in tactical style, hazel eyes that could track movement at 1,500 meters through dense forest canopy. For 3 years, she had served as designated marksman for various special operations units. But to most SEAL commanders, she was still just the female sniper who got assigned to their missions by higher headquarters. They respected her accuracy on the range, but none of them truly believed she belonged in frontline combat operations. Luna's background was unlike any other sniper in the military. Raised in the Alaskan wilderness by a father who was both a master hunter and former Army Ranger, she had learned to track and shoot before she could properly read. Every winter of her childhood had been spent surviving in conditions that would challenge experienced soldiers, learning patience, stealth, and precision that couldn't be taught in any military school. Her father, Sergeant Major Robert Tracker Cross, had been one of the Army's most decorated snipers before retiring to become a wilderness guide in Alaska. He had taught Luna that true marksmanship wasn't about perfect conditions on a shooting range. It was about making impossible shots in impossible circumstances when lives depended on a single bullet placed with surgical precision. "Baby girl," he would tell her as they tracked elk through snow-covered mountains, "anyone can hit a target when everything's perfect. A real sniper hits the target when everything's wrong. Bad weather, bad position, bad odds. That's when you find out what you're really made of." Robert Cross had survived 3 tours as a sniper in Iraq and Afghanistan, accumulating 89 confirmed kills and earning a reputation as one of the deadliest marksmen in military history. But more than just a killer, he was a student of ballistics, wind patterns, and the psychological aspects of precision shooting that separated true snipers from mere marksmen. He had retired from active duty after Luna's mother died in a car accident, choosing to raise his daughter in the Alaskan wilderness, where he could pass on skills that the Army couldn't teach. Their cabin was 50 miles from the nearest neighbor, accessible only by snowmobile in winter and bushplane in summer. Luna's education came from correspondence courses, but her real learning happened in the forest. By age 12, Luna could track wounded animals through snow for miles, reading subtle signs that most experienced hunters would miss at 14. She was making consistent kills on caribou at ranges exceeding 800 meters, using rifles that her father had modified for extreme long-range shooting. At 16, she could survive alone in the wilderness for weeks, living off the land and moving through terrain without leaving traces that even experienced trackers could follow. Her father had also taught her the mental discipline required for precision shooting under stress. Hours spent motionless in hunting blinds, waiting for the perfect shot while mosquitoes swarmed and weather conditions changed constantly. The patience to track a single target for days, learning its patterns and habits before taking the one shot that mattered. "Shooting is the easy part," he would explain during their evening discussions about ethics and responsibility. "Any fool can pull a trigger. The hard part is knowing when to shoot, when not to shoot, and living with the consequences of both decisions. A sniper's greatest weapon isn't the rifle, it's the mind behind it." Luna had enlisted after graduating, summa cum laude from the University of Alaska with a degree in wilderness studies and ballistics. Her military aptitude tests were off the charts. Her marksmanship scores broke records, and her understanding of fieldcraft impressed veteran instructors who had been teaching snipers for decades. During basic training, her drill sergeants had initially been skeptical of the quiet girl from Alaska who seemed more comfortable in the field than in formation. But when they saw her performance on the rifle range, consistently shooting perfect scores at ranges where other recruits struggled to hit the target, they realized they were dealing with someone exceptional. Her sniper school instructors had been equally impressed. Luna's scores weren't just perfect. They demonstrated understanding of advanced concepts that usually took years to develop. She could calculate wind drift and bullet drop without instruments, read environmental conditions that other students couldn't detect, and most importantly, she possessed the psychological stability to make precision shots under extreme pressure. But despite her exceptional qualifications, Luna faced constant skepticism from male commanders who couldn't separate her gender from her capabilities. She had been assigned to support roles, given safe missions, and constantly reminded that frontline combat was different from training exercises. The skepticism wasn't limited to her shooting skills. Male officers questioned whether she had the physical strength for extended operations, the emotional stability for combat stress, and the aggressive mindset required for special operations. They saw her quiet demeanor and professional politeness as signs of weakness rather than confidence. Luna's first deployment to Afghanistan had been with a Ranger unit that treated her as an unwelcome addition, forced on them by politically correct policies. Despite proving her capabilities repeatedly, she was consistently assigned to overwatch positions far from the action, given defensive rather than offensive missions, and excluded from planning sessions where her tactical input could have been valuable. Commander Marcus Steele Blake was the worst of them all. At 42 years old, with 18 years of SEAL operations and 3 Bronze Stars, he commanded SEAL Team 6 with old-school attitudes that belonged in a different era. Blake had built his reputation on aggressive tactics and overwhelming firepower, believing that special operations required physical dominance and masculine aggression that women simply couldn't provide. Cross is technically proficient, he would tell other officers when forced to work with her. But when bullets start flying and men are dying, you need someone with the psychological toughness to handle real combat. Support roles are more appropriate for female personnel. Blake's attitude wasn't unusual among special operations commanders, who had built their careers in an exclusively male environment. They viewed the integration of women into combat roles as a social experiment that compromised operational effectiveness. In their minds, Luna represented everything that was wrong with modern military policies that prioritize political correctness over combat readiness. Luna endured his condescending comments and patronizing assignments in professional silence, knowing that arguing would only confirm his prejudices. But she also knew that eventually circumstances would give her the opportunity to prove what she was truly capable of. She had spent her off-duty time studying Blake's previous operations, analyzing his tactical preferences and identifying weaknesses in his planning methodology. Blake was an aggressive commander who preferred direct approaches and overwhelming force. But his confidence sometimes blinded him to subtle threats that required different solutions. That opportunity came during Operation Silent Thunder, a classified mission in the dense forests of eastern Afghanistan. Intelligence reports indicated that a high-value target, a terrorist leader responsible for multiple attacks on coalition forces, was meeting with local commanders in a remote compound deep in enemy territory. The intelligence package was extensive, but incomplete. Satellite imagery showed the compound's layout and defensive positions, but the dense forest canopy limited visibility of surrounding areas. Electronic intercepts suggested the meeting would take place within a specific time window, but the exact number of security personnel remained uncertain. Luna had studied the intelligence more carefully than anyone else on the team, using her wilderness experience to read environmental clues that others missed. The forests surrounding the compound showed signs of recent human activity, paths that were too regular to be natural, vegetation patterns that suggested concealed positions, and defensive preparations that indicated a much larger security force than official estimates suggested. The mission parameters were straightforward. Infiltrate the target area, confirm the HVT's presence, and eliminate him along with his leadership council. But the tactical situation was anything but simple. The compound was surrounded by thick forest that provided excellent concealment for defenders, and intelligence suggested at least 20 armed militants were providing security. Blake hadn't considered. The position he had chosen was tactically sound for observing the compound, but it wouldn't allow her to provide effective support if his team encountered serious resistance. "Sir," she said carefully, "if I move too." This ridgeline here, I'd have better coverage of. Blake's plan was typically aggressive. A direct assault by his 8-man SEAL team, supported by Luna providing overwatch from a distant position. In his mind, she would be safely positioned far from the actual fighting, picking off any stragglers who tried to escape while the real warriors handled the dangerous work. Cross, you'll establish overwatch here. Blake pointed to a position on the tactical map that was over 800 meters from the target compound. Stay put, stay quiet, and only engage if someone tries to run. Leave the real fighting to us. Luna studied the terrain carefully, noting elevation changes, wind patterns, and lines of sight that the entire approach route and multiple escape corridors. I could provide more effective support for the team. Blake's expression hardened. Cross, I've been planning these operations since before you knew what a rifle was. You'll take the position I assign and follow the orders I give. This isn't a training exercise where you get to improvise. Luna nodded professionally. But privately she began planning for contingencies that Blake's aggressive confidence couldn't envision. She had studied the intelligence reports more carefully than anyone else on the team, and she had noticed patterns in enemy behavior that suggested this operation might not go as smoothly as Blake expected. The insertion went perfectly. Blake's team moved through the forest with the practiced silence of elite operators, while Luna established her position exactly where ordered. Through her scope, she could see the compound clearly, a cluster of buildings surrounded by defensive positions that looked exactly as intelligence had described. But as Luna scanned the surrounding forest, she began noticing details that the preliminary reconnaissance had missed. Enemy positions that were too well concealed to be seen from satellite imagery. Movement patterns that suggested a much larger security force than intelligence estimates. Most importantly, defensive preparations that indicated the enemy might be expecting company. Her scope revealed camouflaged fighting positions that had been expertly constructed to blend with natural terrain. Radio antennas disguised as dead branches, weapon caches hidden beneath false vegetation. The defensive preparations were too sophisticated for a routine security detail. This was a carefully planned defensive network designed to destroy any assault force. Phantom, this is Steele, Blake's voice crackled through her earpiece. We're beginning our approach. Maintain overwatch and report any movement. Luna tracked Blake's team through her scope as they moved toward the compound. 8 SEAL operators advancing in perfect formation, confident in their training and firepower. But through her magnified optics, she could also see what they couldn't. Enemy fighters positioning themselves for an ambush that would trap the entire SEAL team in a crossfire. Steele, this is Phantom. I'm seeing movement in the tree line approximately 50 meters north of your position. Multiple fighters taking defensive positions. Phantom, maintain radio discipline. We don't see any immediate threats. Continue overwatch. Luna bit back her frustration. Blake's team was walking into a carefully prepared ambush, but his confidence in his own tactical assessment was preventing him from recognizing the danger. She could see at least 12 enemy fighters maneuvering to surround the SEAL team, but from Blake's ground-level perspective, they remained invisible. The ambush was triggered when Blake's team was exactly where the enemy wanted them, caught in open ground between the compound and the forest with no immediate cover and limited escape routes. The forest erupted with automatic weapons fire from multiple directions. Muzzle flashes lighting up concealed positions that had been invisible until that moment. Contact! Contact! Blake's voice carried panic and disbelief. We're taking fire. From multiple positions. Where did they come from? Luna could see the entire tactical situation through her scope. Blake's team pinned down in a clearing 12 enemy fighters positioned in a perfect enveloping formation, and more hostiles moving to close off escape routes. The SEAL team was trapped in exactly the kind of ambush that destroyed elite units when overconfidence met superior enemy preparation. Steele, this is Phantom. I have visual on 12 enemy positions. I can eliminate the threat, but I need to relocate to effective firing position. Negative, Phantom. Maintain your position and wait for instructions. But Luna was already moving. Blake's tactical stubbornness was going to get his entire team killed, and she wasn't going to watch 8 American warriors die because of his prejudices and pride. She had trained her entire life for exactly this moment when conventional tactics failed and unconventional solutions were the only option. Moving through dense forest with equipment that weighed over 60 pounds required skills that couldn't be taught in any school. Luna flowed through the undergrowth like a ghost, using deer trails and natural concealment to approach the enemy positions without being detected. Every step was calculated, every movement designed to keep her invisible while closing the distance to effective shooting range. The position she chose wasn't the one Blake had assigned. It was a rocky outcrop that gave her clear lines of sight to all 12 enemy positions while keeping her concealed from their view. Setting up her rifle in this location required climbing techniques she had learned in Alaska and fieldcraft that came from years of hunting in impossible terrain. Through her scope, Luna could see Blake's team desperately trying to fight their way out of the ambush. They were professional soldiers using good tactics, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered by enemies who had chosen the battlefield and set the terms of engagement. The first shot was the most important. Luna had identified the enemy commander, a fighter who was coordinating the ambush through hand signals and radio communications. Eliminating him would disrupt their command structure and create the confusion. She needed to systematically destroy the rest of the force. Distance, 547 meters. Wind variable, gusting through forest canopy. Target, mobile, partially concealed. Behind natural cover. The kind of shot that separated real snipers from people who could just hit stationary targets on a range. Luna controlled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow to the rhythm her father had trained into her years ago. The crosshairs settled on the enemy commander's center mass, accounting for wind drift and the slight upward angle. She exhaled half her breath and held it, finger applying steady pressure to the trigger. The rifle fired. 547 meters away, the enemy commander dropped instantly, his radio and binoculars scattering as his body fell. The coordinated ambush immediately began to lose cohesion as the remaining fighters tried to figure out where the shot had come from. Luna was already acquiring her second target, a machine gunner who was pouring devastating fire into Blake's position. The angle was more difficult this time, requiring her to shoot through a gap in the forest canopy that was barely wider than her bullet. Second shot, second kill. The psychological impact of losing their commander and heavy weapons specialist sent ripples of confusion through the enemy force. They had been in complete control of the engagement, systematically destroying a trapped SEAL team. Now they were being hunted by an invisible predator who was picking them off with surgical precision. Blake's voice crackled through the radio, filled with amazement and disbelief. "Phantom, where are those shots coming from?" "This is Phantom. I'm eliminating the threat. Keep your heads down and be ready to move when I give the signal." The third and fourth shots came within seconds of each other. Luna had identified 2 fighters who were trying to flank Blake's position, and she eliminated them with a technique her father had taught her. Rapid target acquisition that allowed her to engage multiple threats without losing momentum. Each shot was a masterpiece of precision marksmanship. Wind conditions varied between targets, forcing Luna to adjust her calculations for each engagement. Enemy fighters were using natural concealment that made them nearly invisible, requiring her to track subtle movements and predict their behavior. By the time she fired her 5th shot, the remaining enemy fighters were beginning to panic. They had been ambushing a trapped SEAL team, but somehow they were being systematically destroyed by an opponent they couldn't see or locate. The psychological pressure of being hunted was breaking their discipline and exposing them to further attacks. Luna's 6th and 7th shots eliminated 2 fighters who were trying to escape through the forest. They had abandoned their positions and were running for safety, but Luna tracked their movement through dense vegetation and stopped them with shots that would have impressed Olympic marksmen. The 8th, 9th, and 10th shots came as the remaining enemy fighters tried to consolidate into a defensive position. But Luna had anticipated their movement and positioned herself to engage them as they exposed themselves. Each shot was calculated. for maximum effect. Eliminating threats with the cold efficiency of a professional killer. Have you ever witnessed someone perform at a level that seemed almost superhuman? Blake's team watched in stunned silence as Luna systematically dismantled an enemy force that had been destroying them moments before. The 11th shot eliminated a sniper who had been targeting Blake's medic. Luna had spotted the muzzle flash from his concealed position and returned fire before he could engage a second target. The shot traveled through forest undergrowth that should have made accuracy impossible. But Luna's bullet found its mark with mathematical precision. The 12th and final shot was the most difficult. The last enemy fighter had taken cover behind a fallen log that provided excellent protection from most angles. But Luna had positioned herself to exploit the one gap in his defenses, a shooting lane that was barely 6 inches wide and required her to thread her bullet between two tree trunks. The shot was perfect. The threat was eliminated. 5 minutes after the ambush began, 12 enemy fighters lay dead in the forest, and Blake's SEAL team was alive and unharmed. The engagement that should have destroyed an elite American unit had instead become a demonstration of precision marksmanship that redefined what one sniper could accomplish in combat. "Phantom, this is Steele." Blake's voice carried a tone that Luna had never heard from him before. Complete respect mixed with amazement. "I need you to explain to me what just happened." Luna keyed her radio calmly. "Threat eliminated, sir. Area is secure. Recommend we continue with primary mission." The primary mission, eliminating the high-value target, proceeded without incident. The terrorist leader and his council were eliminated in a surgical strike. That went exactly as planned now that the security force had been neutralized by Luna's precision shooting. But the moment that defined everything came during the helicopter extraction, when Blake sat across from Luna in the cargo bay and looked at her with completely different eyes. "Cross," he said quietly, "I owe you an apology. What you did back there, I've never seen anything like it. 12 targets, 5 minutes, perfect shooting under impossible conditions. You saved every life on my team." Luna looked at the SEAL commander who had spent months doubting her capabilities and treating her like a liability. "Sir, I was just doing my job." "No," Blake replied firmly. "You were doing something far beyond your job. You were being the sniper I never realized we had." The after-action reports from Operation Silent Thunder became classified case studies examined by Special Operations Commands worldwide. Luna's engagement was analyzed as a perfect example of precision marksmanship under extreme pressure, demonstrating tactical innovations that challenged conventional doctrine about sniper employment. 6 months later, Staff Sergeant Luna Cross was promoted to Sergeant First Class and offered assignment to the most elite sniper units in the military, but more importantly, she never again heard a SEAL commander question whether women belonged in frontline combat operations. Commander Blake became one of her strongest advocates, frequently telling other officers, "If you want to understand what a real sniper can accomplish, watch Cross work. She doesn't just shoot targets. She controls the entire battlefield through precision and patience." The relationship between Blake and Luna evolved from mutual antagonism to professional respect and eventually to the kind of trust that exists between warriors who have saved each other's lives. Blake learned to listen to her tactical assessments while Luna learned to work within command structures that valued her input rather than dismissing it. 2 years later, when Blake was promoted to admiral and given command of Naval Special Warfare Group, his first personnel request was for Luna Cross to serve as his senior sniper instructor. Her techniques became standard curriculum for all special operations snipers, male and female. Today, Master Sergeant Luna Phantom Cross runs the military's most advanced sniper training program, teaching techniques that combine Alaskan wilderness skills with modern precision shooting technology. Her students learn not just marksmanship, but the patience, fieldcraft, and tactical thinking that turned good shooters into legendary snipers. Have you ever been underestimated so completely that people couldn't see your true capabilities until circumstances forced them to? Luna's story reminds us that the most dangerous assumptions are the ones we make about people based on preconceptions rather than performance. The SEAL commander who dismissed her as just the female sniper learned that gender was irrelevant when bullets were flying and lives were on the line. What mattered was precision, patience, and the willingness to take responsibility for outcomes that others couldn't achieve. If you believe that true capability reveals itself when everything is on the line, share this story. Because somewhere someone is being judged by their demographics rather than their skills, not knowing that their moment to prove everyone wrong is coming. Luna Cross didn't just eliminate 12 enemies in 5 minutes. She eliminated every assumption about what women could accomplish in combat. Sometimes our greatest victories come not from meeting expectations, but from exceeding them so completely that the expectations themselves are forced to change.